Welcome everyone. The topic today, I'm going to talk about how to use deep learning to implement anti-poverty programs. And about me, I'm a principal data scientist for a firm called Infinite Sum Modeling, which does a lot of work in anti-poverty programs, trade, and they also closely work with World Bank and United Nations as well. I've joined them recently, and I've joined Musk Research Lab last week, and I had a great welcome today. I'm caught up with all the Musk Research founders and all the members today. And yes. I'm also the Bangalore chapter lead for Women in Machine Learning and Data Science, and I'm the ambassador for Women in Data Science, which is a Stanford University initiative for Mysore. And as a part of which, we will be organizing an international conference in Mysore, which will be featuring when Stanford is organizing in Stanford. The same time we'll be organizing in Mysore, we'll feature all the outstanding women speakers across the world. If you're interested in speaking or if you want to nominate any of the women research who has done great work, do write to us. I'll also be part of the conference which is happening in IIM Bangalore for Bangalore. And for Mysore, I'll be the sole organizer, but for Bangalore, it's been spearheaded by IIM Bangalore. I'm part of the organizing committee for Bangalore as well. For Bangalore, it's 6th and 7th, and if you have any top researchers, you can write the nomination to us, and we'll send it to Stanford University. So the speakers has to be approved by Stanford. So if you have nominations, do send it to me. And Women in Machine Learning and Data Science is a community which we run quarterly meetups in Bangalore, and I'm the chapter lead for Bangalore. We have around 65 to 70 chapters across the world. And we generally conduct meetups in IIM Bangalore or in the research labs in Bangalore. Our next meetup is coming up on December 14th in Bangalore. During the WITS conference in Stanford, there'll be a datathon which is happening. It's a global datathon where across the globe you can participate. And so this year, the datathon is going to be on AI for healthcare. And it's going to be an NLP-based problem. So there is, this datathon is mainly to bring up the women in data science. There's very few women in data science, so like to increase the number of women and to make them contribute more. And so the mandate is like minimum, the datathon will have 4 participants, of which minimum 2 members have to be women. And the other 2 can be men, or all the 4 can be women as well. To help people, participate in the datathon, we are having a workshop on December 14th at IIM Bangalore. So where you can come there, attend the workshop. So I'll be running the workshop there. And there are other speakers from Walmart Research Labs, IBM Research Labs as well. So we'll help you form the teams. We'll give you all the basics required to actually participate in the datathon. And there'll be 10 researchers from top research labs in India who will be acting as your mentor. So once you form the teams there, we'll assign you with the mentors, and you can get started with the datathon. So these are like huge community initiatives which I'm part of. And so I think for Hyderabad also, there is a chapter, there's a Women in Data Science community who's going to organize. I just saw the names there. I don't remember the name, who is the ambassador name, but there is one male and one female ambassador for Hyderabad. So I forgot. I think her name is Shakuntala. I don't know. So yes, this is about the women. So in August 3rd and 4th, I organized a conference called Neuro AI. It's India's first ever research symposium in the interface of neuroscience and data science. So it was a not-for-profit free conference to the public. We had a great lineup of speakers, almost the people with top 50 in the intersection of neuroscience and data science spoke. Most of the faculty speakers from IISc, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, ISR Pune and ISA Pune, DBS TIFR, National Brain Research Center, and some visiting faculty from MIT as well. He's joining a full-time faculty. My co-organizer was a visiting faculty from MIT. Next April, he's joining as a full-time faculty there. His name is Dr. Srikanth Ramaswamy. So this Neuro AI will be like running out pre-conference events around 10 to 12 next year, starting Jan. And the main conference will be in October. So if you want to be a speaker, if you know anybody who's doing a good work in the intersection of neuroscience or data science, or this time we'll have people who are working only in data science as well. So our main aim is to promote cross-pollination in this field. So it's not necessary you should have worked in the intersection. You could be a person who's either a neuroscience or a data science person. We'll still put you in the same room and we'll enable the cross-pollination. So if you're a very good speaker, or if you want to nominate someone, do reach out to me. And so this is about infinite sum modeling. So there's a lot of work which we have done in poverty. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about exact work which I've done because the paper has not been published yet. So my co-author for the paper is Dr. Badri Narayanan from University of Washington. He's the affiliate professor there. So he's also the founder of Infinite Sum Modeling, which is a consulting company based out of which is span across in 4 continents, India, and we have an office in Toronto, and we're also based out in China and in US. So these are founders, some of the clients which they've served. Yes. So about this, I'll start with a quote. And most of the people in the world are poor. So if we know the economics of being poor, we would know much of the economics that really matters. So most of the people in the world are poor. How many people agree with this statement? All right. Do you think, has this poverty level changed from 1950 to 2019? Has there any change in the poverty level from this duration? Or is it still gone bad? You think it has not changed? Why do you think it's not changed?
I think extreme poverty has been reduced to a great extent, but of course not completely, because SDG 1 is like no poverty, right? So it still has to be achieved.
Do you think by 2030 there will be poverty gone?
Well, you know, we're behind on the SDGs right now, so I'm actually not optimistic, but I do think we're moving in the right direction.
You don't think we are moving in the right direction?
I think we're moving in the right direction, but I'm not optimistic that we'll hit zero poverty by 2030.
All right. So why do you think there's no change at all?
So for sake of debate, to be on the other side, the world population is also increasing, right?
Yeah.
And the distance between the poorest and the richest is also increasing. So effectively, if you look at the numbers, we're higher. Percentage may have fluctuated.
So. Yeah. Do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, good afternoon. Poverty is day by day was increasing because now we are doing this type of SDC. When we are going to reach to the below around people, then automatically poverty is going to be decreased. But we are trying now. In 2030, it may going to decrease. But now it's not going to be decreased because this type of programs are not yet started from past 10, 20 years. Now we are concentrating now SDs in India. I'm talking about in India. Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you for sharing your opinion. So today's talk is how to use data science. I'm a data scientist by profession. How to use data science techniques like deep learning, computer vision, and see if we can contribute at least to an extent to the reduction of poverty, or we can help in the anti-poverty plans. This is from Theodore Skulls in his Nobel Prize winning lecture after he won the Nobel Prize in 1979. This was his quote. And yes, there's something called poverty trap. If you take Africa, Africa is the richest country underground. How many of you agree? Why do you agree? Yeah. So under the ground, Africa has got 2.4 trillion wealth or something. It's the richest continent in the world, under the ground. But above the ground, it's the poorest continent in the world. So yes, so what is stopping, when it has all the resources, when you take hydroelectric power, Nile has got, take Congo, Nile is the biggest river in Congo. So Nile has got the hydroelectric power and all of it to generate electricity to the entire Africa. And so they've got all the richest minerals like, so what is this mineral? Any guesses? Okay, good guess. Next. I'm testing your whatever helium. All right. Cobalt. So it has got all these richest minerals and all that, but still, like, why is it poverty is still there? Why is the government is still planning a lot of mechanisms? I mean, United Health is coming with a lot of schemes and stuff. Why are they not able to penetrate deeper and bring about some change? So what is stopping them? So there's one mechanism which they've observed, which is poverty trap. So this is a cycle. This is a very vicious cycle. It loops in itself. So it's very difficult to penetrate this cycle. So if you say one affects the other, and this goes on into a loop. So violence and low productivity will cause poverty, and poverty will cause the hunger, because like there's no money to buy food, then the natural resource, no money to plant, do agriculture, then the natural resources goes for a toss. And then when natural resources and hunger are there, then there's low productivity, and then there's nobody having resources to eat. So when they see somebody having little resources, they try to grab that. They don't see logic in it because they just want to feed themselves. There's no food at all. So then they start the violence. This goes into a loop. This is a very vicious cycle which is very, very difficult to break through. No matter there's so many schemes, so many NGOs are coming up with schemes, but then none of it is able to penetrate into it because of this poverty trap. It's a very vicious cycle. And the picture speaks for itself. This is one picture. So can anybody guess the story behind this picture? Yeah.
Is it Nigeria?
Yes.
Or oil?
Oil, yes.
Yeah. There was a leakage of oil, and it was destroying the natural resources of the people there. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. It's from Nigeria, and it's like there's a company called Shell. So they had their oil fields and all that. So they did not have a proper outlet mechanism. So they were draining into the waterbed out there. So the same waterbed, people were using it for their own agriculture and drinking water and stuff. Already there's less sanitation facilities or medical facilities in Africa, but in spite of this. And Shell, being a multinational corporation, did not take response. Anybody working for Shell here? No one? All right, you are.
There was also another reason for the leakage, because people broke down the pipeline to get oil themselves. So it's not always as simple as that. There are more often there are more reasons why these things happen. So, yeah.
There are more reasons, yeah, I agree. And but Shell did not take accountability for that. There's a lot of NGOs which sued Shell, and I mean, there were some good NGOs who had the courage to fight against Shell, and they won the case, and Shell had to pay a lot back. So this was a story, and these are some of the pictures of the real-time situation here. So there are 3 collaborators for the project which we are working on. Since our project, the paper, we will be releasing it only by next July and September. So I'll just talk about the generic technologies which are used in anti-poverty programs, but I'll not be able to talk about my exact work. Because my collaborators are not. So my exact part is using deep learning to identify the poverty zone is where I work it. So there's Dr. Badri Narayanan. He, once we get the insights from these deep learning technology, how can we apply it to economic and technology? How can the government use these insights to implement a better economic and technology policy decision? So he's basically an economist, and he works for McKinsey as a part-time economist. So yes. So the use case for the deep learning problem is, So this is an NGO based out of Africa, Give Directly. See, this is one of the good NGOs which has got good reputation. I have not closely worked with Give Directly, so I cannot give any guarantees. But from the news and all of it, you can gather that they're doing good work in Africa, and they have good reputation for doing good work. So what Give Directly exactly does is they look out for donors of money across the world. So they look out who is interested in donating money, and once they have a premium amount set, like maybe $10 million or $5 to $10 million, they have a set a premium amount. Once they reach that amount, once they have got that amount from the donors, they stop. And they want to give this money to the poorest of poorest people, the people who are really poor and who they want to unconditionally transfer money to the poorest of poor. So they have to identify in a particular region where are the poorest of poor people residing. So this is a use case. So how will you do it? Logically, how will you do it? Using mobile phones. What do you say?
What did you want to do? Identify the poorest.
Poorest of poorest people whom I can give the money.
Which people you can give it to? Okay, so I don't exactly know how to solve that problem, but I would use correlations between, I would use mobile phones to track people for sure. And I would use maybe payment information, because I know in Africa there's a lot of payment systems and so on and so forth. I would also probably use data from, probably M-Copa or somebody, or, I'd probably also use information on their solar systems which they might have bought, and I might use that to correlate with their socioeconomic strata somehow. So maybe I do that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good guess. There's a lot of work done in Columbia University by researchers out there in this mobile phone and all. But we'll come back to it. On a macroeconomic view or a bird's eye view, is there any other way? Thanks for the guess. And is there anybody has any suggestions on how I can identify a poorest of poorest people in a particular city? You have? Yeah, sure.
So according to me, it will be a very simple term. We say roti, kapda, makan. So these three factors, which is basic necessity of life, one who is not able to avail that, so I'll consider him as the poorest of the poor on the comparison factor.
Yeah.
Every country is going to be strength and weakness is just like imports and exports. So when we are going to see the imports and exports of every country, what we are importing, what we are exporting. So we are importing more means we are somewhat poor, and we are exporting means we are rich. So based on the economical survey, we can identify, and also GDP. So every year, every country is going to be given GDP, Indian GDP, and Africa. Like this, every country is going to be give every year GDP rate. So in terms of all strategies like agriculture and industry, so like this they are going to give. Whether they are increasing means, so in some cases, agriculture is increasing this year 3%, next year 2%. Means in terms of agriculture, it was demand is the economically weak from compared to the present year and past year. So when we are going to compare like this, we'll came to know that basic needs of what she said, food, it is not there means automatically we are in poorest of poor, right?
Thank you so much.
If you're taking a particular city, then people who are dying the most in that particular city because of no shelter or food, maybe we can figure out that's the poorest city. Yeah, kind of. That's because of no shelter or food.
Thank you so much. Something which I've never imagined. You can even track poverty using mortality rate. Thanks for the new idea. And thank you all of you for, You want to say something?
Yeah. Maybe we can use satellite imaging of a particular area and see what material houses are made of, and try to distinguish what socioeconomic status people belong to based on that. Somebody has a hut made of thatch or hut versus concrete versus I don't know what other material.
I mean, you told the use case, the solution of the use case, which I'm proposing here. So exactly right. So traditionally, you mentioned about surveys, right? So traditionally in Africa, there's something called, thanks a lot for all of your inputs. And traditionally in Africa, there's a survey called DHS survey, which they consider most accurate. So DHS survey requires a lot of money, millions of dollars to get the volunteers and to be able to go door-to-door survey, and takes for a particular bigger region, it takes around 2 years to complete the survey. And the moment you complete the survey, like 2 years, the economics would have still changed. So how accurate is your survey after 2 years? You know, from the start of the survey to the end, there's a lot of things which changes in 2 years. So survey mechanisms are very expensive, takes a longer period of time to complete, and so yeah, it requires a lot of manpower as well. So a better alternative for it is satellite imagery. So satellite imagery, you can identify the houses in the satellite. Using satellite imagery, you can exactly identify the poorest of poor regions, especially with the kind of computational power which we are in right now in this computational revolution, resource revolution we are in. Like you can get the job done even in few hours of time. There's cloud TPU and GPU and all that coming up. So you can even, 2-3 years back, it still took 2-3 days to do it. But now with the kind of revolution and kind of products which has come out in the market, you can get it done in few hours in a day. So satellite imagery. So yeah, so there are some problems with getting this job done using traditional methods like surveys, and so that's where the satellite imagery comes to play. But again, with satellite imagery, the problem is still not solved. So if you see a satellite imagery for a country like United States or Australia or a very developed countries, maybe you guys are from, which country are you from? Netherlands, yeah, from Netherlands and all these European countries, maybe you might have a lot of data. And the survey stores for US and for Australia, there's a lot of labeled data as well. So in a satellite imagery, the data is, there's a lot of labeled data available in United States particular. Okay, this particular piece of land is a river. So there could be a labeling of data. Okay, this particular point is a school. This particular point is some academic institution or some institutions, or these are points which are being labeled. So based on that, you can identify, okay, if there are certain factors in a particular area, that particular region is economically well developed. So this labeling of data is available for developed countries, but for undeveloped countries like India and for African continents, there's no labeling of data. So if I have to employ resources, again, to sit and label data. Stanford was running an initiative for labeling of data sometime back, I think 4-5 years back, for a different reason, for a different project. But again, if I'm going to sit and label the data, that's going to again take a lot of resources, and it's again a computationally intensive problem. So what is the alternative for doing it? What is the alternative for addressing this problem is transfer learning approach. So how many of you have heard of transfer learning? All right. So what's transfer learning? Transfer learning.
You take a pre-trained deep learning model and you retrain only the last layers for your customized data set.
How many of you are from a data science background here? All right. So the rest of you. Generally, if I go to a non-data science background, a place where there are not many data science students available, then I teach transfer learning through this story. But again, there's like, how many of you know this picture? Okay, Drishyam, yeah, right. All right, this is a movie. This movie you can just, for the people who are not data scientists, for you to understand quickly what transfer learning is. So the movie is about the main character of the person. This movie is an adaptation from a Japanese movie. So the main character of the person is a movie addict. He watches a lot of movies, and so he is inspired by the movies. So he did not have a formal education and stuff. So he watches a lot of movies, and in the movies, he would learn something from each and every movie. So he would apply those learnings or, whatever he has learned from the movies in his real life. That's how he learns. And finally, he does his own daughter murders someone. So to cover up the murder history, he is again inspired by one of the movies, and he solves that murder mystery problem through some knowledge which he has gained from a movie. So the reason why I'm saying this story is transfer learning is learning from one domain and applying the knowledge which you have learned in one domain to solve a similar problem in a different and similar problem. So that's about transferring knowledge from what you learn in one domain to solve a different problem. So the way transfer learning is involved here is there's a shortcut to identify, to surpass this problem of not having labeled data, that is to use nighttime satellite imagery. So in a nighttime satellite imagery, if you take the areas which has got light intensity indicates economic development. So the areas which are bright in the night. So this is North Korea and South Korea. You can make a guess which is economically well-developed country because there's more light there. So it's a socio-economic indicator that this nighttime light intensity is a socio-economic indicator. So what I'm using in this, there's a paper which has come out by Stanford. Transfer learning from this paper came out in 2016, which was a revolutionary paper which came out in 2016 from Stanford researchers. So most of the work, there's a lot of work done in this deep learning part in India also. There's a company called JD Insights which does a lot of work. And they've collaborated with Niti Aayog and they're doing good work. And across the globe in Sri Lanka and in Manipal, Philippines, there's a lot of people who are doing research. But most of the work, published work, if you take up, it's heavily influenced by this paper. So they would have done an optimization, but this paper will be like 75% of what their content is and 25% an optimization above this paper. So almost all the papers which has come out in the last 2 years is being heavily influenced by this work. So it's a very groundbreaking work. So what this paper suggests is, there is a competition called ImageNet. How many of you know about ImageNet? So yes, I'll hear from Joy. Explain it to everyone so they understand what ImageNet is.
Okay, I think anyone else.
All right. Is anyone volunteering to explain what's ImageNet to the rest of them?
ImageNet is essentially there's a huge data set of images that is being provided, well, not exactly open source, but is being provided for public consumption for a non-profit purpose. Yeah, not only satellite images, I think around 10,000 different classes of images. And they also have an annual competition for machine learning based algorithms for classifying all these different images. And this competition is where the sort of the classical image classification programs and the initial convolution neural network based algorithms have essentially been introduced to the world.
Thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge. And the ImageNet classification problem is there's a problem running out every year. So this is traditionally, there are a lot of deep learning models which has come up, VGG16, ResNet, LaxNet, there's a lot of models which has come out. So all these models are the models which has been proposed for this ImageNet problem. ImageNet problem is nothing but there are 1,000 different objects which the architecture has to classify correctly. The objects could be anything, your table, your chair, and all that. These are 1,000 different classes of objects. So the models have been trained in millions of images, and they have to correctly predict these 1,000 classes. So every year, starting from 2010, there's been revolutionary models which is coming up. So initial models, the error rate was around 36, 35, and then around 2012, the error rate came down. Then 2015, the error rate came down. Even now, I think the error rate now is almost close to humans. I think they have exceeded humans as well. I'm not good with statistics, you can check. Now it's the current models which have come out recently are as good as humans classifying these objects. So these are this is what is an ImageNet classification model. So we are actually using a CNN which is trained on an ImageNet. So we are getting the knowledge from this classification task. We are transferring this knowledge. So this is a model which has already learned how to classify model. We're taking this knowledge and we're transferring it to the model. And in the second layer, what we have is we use transfer learning. That is, we use this nighttime satellite imagery to actually make a prediction from the daytime satellite imagery. And then we try to generate the feature vectors from the first model. I mean, some of the concepts here might be a little overwhelming for some of you who are not from a deep learning background, but it's completely okay. You can still, there are resources which I'll be sharing with you. You can still go back and refer and understand the concept. For now, you can understand these are things which will, these are different layers which will help in getting your job easier. And it's also solving the problem of not having a labeled data in your satellite imagery. Yeah.
So there is a hierarchy, right? So the hierarchy is also important. Like just like OrdNet, we have different hierarchies. Like is a relationship, has a relationship kind of thing. So for ImageNet is also tagged in such a way, and it is saved or organized a way. Like it has those hierarchies as well. Like object, then furniture, then chair, then table. If within chair, like so in that way it is also stored. So that is an.
Thanks a lot, Joy, for your knowledge. This is about how you use transfer learning as a second layer to actually tap into this knowledge. Using these nighttime satellite imagery, I'll be able to exactly predict which region in my daytime satellite imagery is, which region is economically developed and which is not economically developed. So for the model which has been proposed in 2016, there's no requirement of manually sitting and labeling the data. The algorithm, the model which has been proposed automatically learns features which are indicative of a socio-economic development. It automatically learns, okay, these are lakes, these are buildings, these are schools. It automatically learns the features. That's how the model has been built. So that's a power of transfer learning as well. So the paper is, if the concept sounds a little overwhelming, you can still go back to the paper and read slowly, because these are like concepts which you cannot get in 5 minutes. So now if you just understand the bird's eye view of it, then that's still okay. This is the problem. So the first problem, if I have to break the problem into 3 problems, then the first problem is the object recognition from ImageNet. And the second problem is predicting nighttime, predicting nighttime light intensity from daytime satellite imagery. And the third problem is actually predicting poverty from a daytime satellite imagery. And so I'll just walk you through the code, so you get an idea of how it's done. So where do you get all these images? Are all these images free of cost, or do you have to invest a lot of money? For the problem of predicting poverty, I think you don't require that kind of a very good resolution and all that. So you can download images free of cost from Google API, and you can also download images, nighttime satellite images, from a website called NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, for free of cost. But there's a minimum, the free of cost band, you can only download up to a certain limit. So once you exceed that limit, maybe you have to go for a premium and stuff. So there's a tab on how much of data you can download per day. But the most common data resources which you can download is from National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, for nighttime satellite images, free of cost. And you can download from Google Static API for the daytime satellite images. And so my slide. This is, okay. Yeah. This is how a sample nighttime satellite imagery looks like. These are some of the steps which you can, this is a sample code which I put in my GitHub. I'll share my slides and GitHub for the people who are interested. You can go back and dig through it, and then I'll put up a lot of resources for people who are totally new, whom you can educate yourself in this field. So for night, and these are quickly the rough set of steps in this notebook. So I'm downloading the nighttime satellite imagery from this website, NOAA. So this website is free of cost to go register yourself. You will get an API key. And then you can, once you give the key, you can directly give the key in your source code and start downloading it. And there's a DHS data, which is a survey data available for most of the African countries. And I can get this for free of cost as well. I'll have to go register in the website. I'll get a key, and the same procedure is for downloading these files. And so there are 3 steps which I'm applying. I'm trying to predict the poverty using nighttime satellite images. Then I'm trying to predict poverty using just daytime satellite images. Then the 3rd step, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use the Stanford learning, Stanford's, I've implemented the Stanford paper, which is using transfer learning to implement the poverty. So I'm just checking out the results of all these 3 methods, and I found transfer learning is more accurate and has got better, in terms of predicting poverty compared to the other methods. So this is a quick implementation. This is my final output. I'm trying to build a wealth map which is indicative of the poverty predicting regions. This is my final output. So I've used very simple libraries like Keras and all that. There's a notebook called demo.pynb in my profile. So you can just walk through this notebook. So I've used very simple libraries like Keras, which is very, very easier to pick up. So if you have a good basic Python knowledge, it's easier to pick up. So I'll not go through the code because there's a lot of non-technical people here. So I'll stop here, and if you have questions, yes.